All right, so I have Illustrator open. I have my 11 by 17 artboard. And I did not draw this. This is just something I got from online. But I'm going to use this as an example. So there's a couple different ways to start attacking this project. First off, as you now have a lot more experience with the pen tool, you can basically do the same process that you did for Project 3 for this one as well. Except instead of starting with an AI-generated image, you've started with some sort of sketch. So I can lock this layer where my image is at, go to my pen tool, and just for simplicity, I'm just going to do this eye in the rise and shine. And basically, start tracing out this shape. And let's say you do make a mistake. Don't forget, you can go to your direct selection tool, keyboard shortcut A, zoom in, and you can select individual anchor points and edit them accordingly. And thus you can start tracing over your drawing. Now you also notice in this case there are these kind of highlights that give some depth, dimension to these letters. I would just go ahead and make a new layer, trace over those as well. I'm going to do it a little bit faster. And it's okay if it doesn't perfectly match your sketch. The sketch is just that, a sketch. It's not like it is the final piece. And then these two highlights here that I've outlined, they're on layer 3, which is above layer 2, which I had the main shape here. So if I go ahead and turn this fill back on, and then I can turn it off, and just like that, you start having your letter forms. And I promise you, it just takes some time to start building it up, because you may look at that and say, oh man, it just doesn't feel the same, or this or that. Just give it time, start making all your letters, and then once you see the colors and the letter combination start working together, it's gonna come together real nice, as long as you start off with a good sketch. Now, there is another way to go about this. You can do what's called image tracing, which is an automatic effect. Before we get to that, and by the way, it's up here. Don't forget, I'm using Essentials Classic workspace, so Window, Workspace, Essentials Classic. You're not going to see this if you're just using the Essentials workspace. This is what you'll get. It's a very kind of, pared down view. So if you want to follow along the way it looks on my screen, make sure you have the Essentials Classic workspace turned on. So we have the image trace button up here. This is the fastest way to turn a pixel image into a vector image. Okay? Now, it doesn't always work perfectly, and so you're pretty much always going to have to go in and do some manual editing. But let's just go ahead and take a look at how it works. So if I click on the little drop-down menu here, there's some presets. Everything from high fidelity photo to using only 3 colors, or a black and white logo. Now actually, for the sake of this, we can even just do black and white. So if I click on that, we get this. And now all of these, if I turn on my outline view, actually, you have to expand it first. So let's say you do like it. Actually, I don't, because we get a lot of this kind of roughness in there. If you have some options, some flexibility over controlling how it traces the image automatically, by going up to the image trace panel. And then you can adjust the threshold. That looks a lot better. You can also adjust some of these settings, how many paths and corners and noise. But the threshold is going to be probably the biggest change you can do. So if you do a little too much, it starts tracing too much of the texture. It's actually right where I had it. It's probably best. Okay, so once you have it where you like, you can press expand. And now it is a vector. You'll notice there's a little wonkiness and wobbliness in the paths. This is what I'm saying. You can go back in and do it manually. So this can save you a lot of time. Instead of doing the pen tool and tracing everything by hand, it won't work with every design. Depending on the if you have more kind of swirls and overlapping stuff, you may have to do a lot more manual work. In this case, it actually worked pretty well. But let's just go in and you'll see what I'm talking about, some of these rough edges here. You can go back in, again, with the direct selection tool. And just like if you had made it with the pen tool, you have anchor points. And you can start adjusting these, smoothing it out. You also, in this case, don't need this many anchor points. This should be a nice smooth curve here. You don't need all this stuff. So you can remove anchor points by pressing the hyphen button on your keyboard. It looks like a minus symbol, and that will bring up the subtract anchor point tool. Or if you hover over, actually they call it the delete anchor point tool. You can see the keyboard shortcut, just the minus here. And then I can click on individual anchor points and remove them. And that will smooth it out because we don't need those there at all. And then I can drag adjust, and just like that, it's much more smooth. So that will save you some time. Now, you also notice if you do something like that, it's going to trace the whole image. So we have some of these blobs and things which we do not want. You can go in there and ungroup this. So you can go to Edit, Object and Ungroup. I'm used to the keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-G. And then I can select some of these shapes individually and delete them. No, it looked like it was, yeah, okay. And because this is a vector now, all these individual shapes, I can change the colors. To whatever I want. Very easily. Oops. Okay, so you still have to know the pen tool. The pen tool is the most important tool in Illustrator, especially going forwards towards making logos and other illustrations, things like that. But a lot of this is one easy way to save some time, especially for simple graphics, things like sketches and whatnot. All right. Now, one other thing, I realize not everybody here may be into drawing or even feel confident in their drawing skills. I would still encourage you to start with some sketching and at least try, putting some of these letters and just getting messy with it. You're not going to know and you're not going to improve if you don't try. But let's say you really don't feel confident about drawing the letters, sketching them by hand with a pencil. And by the way, all you have to do is take a photo. You can scan it if you want, but you can just use your phone, take a photo of your sketch, and then bring it into Illustrator. But let's say you don't want to go that route. You can still do everything manually in Illustrator. You may even though I'm saying we're not using digital text, we don't want to see any typefaces in the final design. But let's just say we go a different route. I'm just going to type rise and shine, just so I can have an idea of what the letters look like. I can still lock this layer and use it kind of like a template, just to get an idea of the dimensions of each letter. And then you can still go in manually and even, let's say, do something. If you want to do some sort of like blocky R or something. Let me do the leg here. You can still start doing some of this completely manually. Again, I encourage you to start with sketching, but if you absolutely insist on not drawing, we can work around that, okay? Even just going in straight with the pen tool again, and let's say you're wanting to do some sort of really kind of wonky S. Now, one thing I'm not going to demo, but just so you're aware, you do have things like the brush tool and the pencil tool in here. There's 1,000,001 tutorials on YouTube about how to use the brush tool and the pencil tool, and how to use different types of brushes. But instead of clicking and creating anchor points, you can manually draw by hand. So let's say this is my final design, and then the one last part of this project is adding a texture. So I've downloaded a paper texture from that link on Unsplash. All I have to do is click and drag it over. It is quite high resolution, so it's much bigger. I can actually just scale it down. I'm just zooming in and out so I can see the whole thing. And it doesn't have to be the exact size of your artboard, as long as it covers the whole thing. And then I'm going to add a blend mode. So you're probably familiar with just changing the opacity. However, here it is. And we'll look at that. So if I take down the opacity of this texture, it looks like this, which could potentially work, but honestly it's not that great. It kind of fades everything out. Usually what's better is to use blend mode. So on my transparency window, if you don't see it here, go up to Window and down to Transparency. Where it says Normal, click on that, and then you'll see your blend modes. Quite often, Multiply, Screen, Overlay, Soft Light, Hard Light are the best ones. So if I do that, Multiply, you'll see it's really blending the texture much better with the color. So it's not kind of decreasing the contrast. Now if I do Screen, it will act very differently. So depending on the colors you're using, if they're darker or lighter, will change which one of these works the best. The overlay wasn't as good. Soft light, no. Hard light is a little bit extreme, so I think the multiply was the best one. And that's all you need to do. We're doing this because it does add a little more texture and organicness to the illustration. Quite often that goes a long way, because otherwise these very, very flat vector graphics can look a little bit too computery. So adding the texture will help that take it a long way, okay?